Good day, everyone. We are the Group 4 and we are going to tackle about the environmental assessment and planning. Defining environmental assessment. What does the word environment mean? An elder best described the word environment as everything outside of your body. The word environment has different meanings to different people. Another definition of environment is everything that surrounds us, both living and non-living. This includes plants, animals, earth, mountains, ocean, air, weather, and sky. Too many in traditional cultures, the environment include the natural world and spiritual world, and the connections between these two worlds. What is an assessment? An assessment is the result of carefully looking at something and making conclusion based on what you see. In other words, an assessment is the result of analyzing and evaluating something. Analyzing something involves making careful observations. Evaluating something involves making a judgment or opinion based on what you see and know to be true. For example, before crossing in a bridge, you need to sure that the bridge is strong, and you make a judgment or evaluate whether the bridge would be safe to cross. What is an environmental assessment? An environmental assessment is an analysis and evaluation of your surroundings. This may include plants, animals, air, earth, and water. There are many ways to complete an environmental assessment in your community. In the past, you may have attended other solid waste or community planning trainings that taught you a method for conducting assessments. One way that an assessment can be done is by involving the whole community and using survey. What is environmental planning? So, environmental planning is a process of identifying, assessing, and coming up with solutions to environmental issues. The goal of environmental planning is to improve the quality of the environment and the health and welfare of people. So, there are some steps in environmental planning. And the first steps is to put together a planning team. So, the first step in environmental planning is to find community members who have concerns about your community's environment, health, and wellness. Involving community leaders as well as a variety of people will give more complete into the planning process. Your planning team may include youth, elders, teachers, health aides, business owners, and other concerned residents. Invite people to join your planning team and hold regular meetings to discuss all environmental and concerns each team member may have. It is important to listen to all concerns. Some may not need immediate attention, but addressing all concerns is a necessary step in creating sense of ownership for the planning team and the community. The second step is to develop a vision for the future. So a vision is a long-term goal or dream. A vision carries a powerful message that is based on the culture and values of the community. Before community begins environmental planning or any other type of planning, the planning team gathers with the community members to develop a vision for the future of the community. A vision is a dream of what is possible. It is an overall picture of what the community wants to be and how it wants to look in the future. So, for example, a community vision could be that all children in the village are healthy. So, be daring with your vision. You may not be able to achieve everything you set for, but your vision will give you a focus and a direction. The third step is to define your community needs using environmental assessment surveys. This step is community-based environment planning. You will be able to identify some of your community's environmental needs using the environmental assessment survey. So once an environmental planning team has been established and has met with other community members to develop a vision. So your next step or the next step is to identify the needs and the desires of the community. So consider the consequences of mining, ecotourism, backyard burning, or the other impacts that climate change may have on your community's future. The fourth step is to identify possible solutions. After the community identifies prioritizes and discusses the environmental issues from both surveys, it is time to find solutions. At this step, it is important to determine all possible solutions to the problem identified and the cost to carry them out. Involving your community throughout the entire planning process and educating them on environmental issues will better prepare community members to help find solutions. Step 5 is put the plan together. Now that you have worked with the community and developed a vision statement, a consensus over perceived environmental issues, a list of environmental problems and needs, and possible solutions, it is time to produce your environmental plan. So, environmental plans are developed to help lay the roadmap for the goals or priorities that the community has identified in the area of environmental protection and health. So, it is important to put the plan down on a paper. A written plan will help current and future staff identify areas of concern and to determine if work is needed to be done. So, many granting agencies also require some sort of plan when applying for fundings. On the sixth step is to carry out your plan. The next step in the planning process is to put your plan into action. So, involves developing a timeable when you would like to accomplish tasks. Consider community members who need to be available for each task. If necessary, plan to carry out tasks when people are not away fishing, hunting, or gathering. So determine the cost to carry out the plan and where the funds will come from. And determine who will be involved in accomplishing each task, for example, for government, individuals, and outside organizations. So keep in mind that the village plan is comprehensive and will include many issues that may take several years to address. Don't let it overwhelm and you and remember that it will take time. The last step is to evaluate your plan. After you produce and carry out your plan, it is important to measure how it worked and make any changes necessary to improve the plan. Develop a good monitoring system that guides workers, volunteers in measuring accomplishments. This way you will know if the actions taken have been successful or effective. One of the easiest methods for keeping track of work performed is to take digital photos before and after any work is done. Perhaps a community environmental advocacy group could be formed to monitor the progress of the projects. This will motivate the workers as well as provide the necessary check and balances. An ideal monitoring system uses input from all age groups from both within and outside of the community. What is environmental risk assessment? So, environmental risk assessment, also known as ERA, is a critical process used to estimate the probability of an adverse outcome of environmental changes caused by human activities. So, kini hinungdan siya sa mga human activities na ginabuhat sa mga tao, dili ta mga pag-care sa atong mga environment, like that. So, this follows the scientific process of hazard determination and the health risks associated with exposure to contamination. So the result of the evaluation helps determine ways to remediate or remove environmental stressors and prevent or mitigate possible ecological damage. The environmental risk management is a crucial measure that companies across industries should adopt, especially when planning a project that could impact people and their surroundings. The very process is risk assessment. So here are some reasons for its great value. The first one is to identify and understand the environmental risks. So threats come in all shapes and sizes. Aside from determining each one, this process ascertains the quantitative and qualitative characteristics of the stressors. The second one is to develop advanced persistent threat. And effective solutions. Getting detailed information as described above helps develop specific strategies for prevention and mitigation and prioritize tasks. The third one is to promote sustainability. The goal of sustainability is to protect the planet from degradation so that it can support the needs of future generations. So environmental risk assessment and sustainable development are completely interconnected concepts because practicing the former is a commitment to affirm the latter. The third one ay the The third one is the compliance with duties and obligations. Conducting an environmental risk assessment before the onset of any project or when a high impact incident occurs is a must. So environmental agencies across the globe set hefty fines and penalties on companies that fall short of standard or fail to comply with these regulations. The fourth one is to ensure health and safety of all stakeholders. So protecting people and the ecology is of utmost importance. Man-made disasters like gas leaks, oil spills, and industrial fires cause injury, death, degradation of the environment, and a host of socio-economic problems. So many of these could be avoided if a thorough environmental risk assessment was conducted. So there are types of environmental risks. Environmental hazards like air pollution or waste leachate cause great harm to human and their surroundings, which is why taking every single one into account through ERA or environmental risk assessment is critical. Here are the different kinds of environmental risks that organizations, especially those in highly regulated industries, should keep an eye out for. The first one is the chemical hazard. The chemical hazard is the inhaling, swallowing, or coming into contact with these toxic chemicals that can cause serious injuries, disease, and even can cause death. The second one is the physical hazard. The physical hazard is the noise pollution, the radiation, and electromagnetic fields are example of these environmental risks. So the third one is the biological hazards. What do you mean by biological hazards? This may be invasive species, genetically modified organisms, or disease causing microbes. That's it. So the fourth one is habitat destruction. So unchecked deforestation, mining, and urbanization negatively impact individual species and the global ecosystem. How is environmental risk assessed? So proper environmental risk assessment, whether it's for human, health, ecology, or both, observes the scientific process and considers these factors. The first one is the hazard identification though. So this answers the question how much of the stressor is present. It involves collecting data about the various hazards and assessing their potential harm in environmental media, for example, soil, water, air, over a particular area. The second is the exposure assessment. The next question asked is how much is the exposure? So this evaluates the likelihood and level of exposure to people, ecological receptors, other living organisms, and the environmental medium. The third one is the consequences evaluation, so also known as the dose response assessment. This answers the final question: how did or will the hazard affect humans or ecological receptors? This study the hazard's degree of toxicity and pathological threshold, for example, concentration levels, length of exposure. So, based on the information gathered by evaluating aforementioned factors, the final steps of the process can be accomplished through risk characterization. This presents the quality and quantity of the risk. So, forecasting the nature, probability, and gravity, its consequences today and in the years to come. So, environmental risk assessment plays a crucial role in determining hazards and their negative effects that can help your organization comply with the law and, more importantly, protect human and environmental health. So, the systematic process of calculating estimates and reasonable probability is critical in determining solutions for prevention and mitigation.
Good evening, everyone, and especially to you, Ma'am. I am Jaisal and Incalyado. The environmental planning process, environmental action plan, influence the goals and objectives of several areas of the comprehensive plan, especially natural resources, economic base, land use, committee, facilities, etc. Can help identify regulations, spending programs, and other actions. Separate documents or can be included in camp plan. 8 steps in creating an environmental action plan. Step 1. The public and elected officials recognize the need for environmental planning. Step 2. Officials then commit people and funding to the environmental planning effort and appoint an environmental advisory committee to assess the planning commission. Advisory committee is suggested. 12 members, range of backgrounds. Step 3. The planning commission staff and the environmental advisory committee conduct an environmental needs assessment survey and solicit public input. Mail a survey to each household or a sample of households in the community. Hold public meetings, draft plan back to the public meeting. Is it consensus? Step 4. The Planning Commission staff and the Environmental Advisory Committee develop a factual base of environmental conditions and analysis. The information includes a natural resource inventory and a built environment inventory. Natural resource inventory includes air, water, soils, geologic formations, farmland, farmlands, forests, plant, and animal species. Identifies location, quantity, and quality. Built environmental inventory includes location, number, age, and condition of the housing stock, commercial and industrial buildings, parks, and public buildings. The inventories well identify areas that can be developed and carrying capacity of developed areas, help compare standards with actual conditions, discover current trends, SWOT analysis. Step 5. The Planning Commission staff and the Environmental Advisory Committee draft a vision statement, broad goals, and specific objectives for the Environmental Action Plan. Overall policy directive for the local government. Goals clear, decisive, avoid should. Objectives spell out the ways the goals can be obtained. Step 6. The Planning Commission staff and Environmental Advisory Committee draft an action strategy to articulate a set of land use controls, infrastructures, spending, tax program, and other regulations that will put the environmental action plan into practice. Step 7. Elected officials solicit public input and adopt the environmental action plan. Step 8. The Planning Commission and elected officials implement, monitor, and evaluate the performance of the environmental action plan through an annual review and make revisions and updates and as needed. Benchmarking annual environmental action report review and update every 3 to 5 years. Environmental impact assessment. Identify the impact of a proposed public and private development activities. Often, the focus is dominantly environmental, but good practices is also address social and economic aspects. Environmental impact assessment was first introduced in the USA under the Environmental Policy Act. Since then, it has involved a variety of shoot assessment techniques have emerged, focusing, for example, on social biodiversity, environmental health, and cumulative effects and risk. Acting as a broader impact assessment toolkit. Steps in environmental impact assessment: screening, alternatives, preliminary assessment, scoping, main environmental impact assessment study, review.